In a heated fight, my wife admitted she'd cheated, expecting forgiveness. Instead, I filed for divorce. Now she's losing everything, and even her family blames her for ruining our perfect marriage. Hello Reddit I+ here. I never thought my life could unravel in the span of a single evening. If you had asked me 3 months ago, I would have told you with complete confidence that my marriage was strong, built on love, respect, and trust. But all of that came crashing down after one fight. One fight that opened the door to betrayal I never thought possible. My name is Lucas, and I'm 34 years old. I married Isabella when we were both 28. She was 26 at the time. A fiery, ambitious woman who worked her way up as an event planner for one of the biggest hospitality firms in the city. I, on the other hand, am an engineer at a civil firm. Our careers couldn't have been more different. But that balance worked. I'm meticulous and detail-oriented, while she thrives on spontaneity and charm. For 6 years, people looked at us as the couple who had it all together. Friends envied the way we supported each other. Our families blended so naturally that holidays felt effortless. We were the pair people pointed to at weddings, saying, "That's what I want someday." At least, that's what I thought we were. The whole thing started over something stupid, at least in hindsight. We'd been house hunting for nearly 6 months, saving aggressively and cutting back on luxuries so we could afford a solid down payment. Then we found it. The house. A charming 3-bedroom cottage with a wraparound porch in a neighborhood we both adored. The problem? It was listed at the absolute top of our budget. Isabella wanted to put in an offer immediately. She fell in love with the place instantly, imagining family dinners in the dining room, kids running around the backyard, summer barbecues with neighbors. I wanted it too, but I suggested we wait a few more weeks. Maybe something slightly more affordable would pop up, and we wouldn't be stretched so thin financially. That should have been a simple disagreement, but instead, it spiraled. "You always have to control everything, Lucas," she snapped, pacing the kitchen. "You never take a leap. You're so terrified of risk that we'll miss out on everything good in life. And being impulsive is how people go broke." I shot back, my voice sharper than I intended. "Do you think we've saved this much by rushing into bad decisions? I just want us to be smart." It went back and forth until we were both saying the same things louder and louder. It wasn't about the house anymore. It was about control, about caution versus recklessness, about values. Eventually, I told her I needed some air and left to stay with my cousin Noah for the night. In my head, it was temporary. We'd done this before. 2 or 3 real arguments in all our years together, and each time we cooled off and came back stronger. I assumed this time would be no different. When I came back the next evening, Isabella was waiting at the kitchen table. Her eyes were red, her hair disheveled, her hands trembling as she fiddled with her coffee mug. I thought she was just nervous about apologizing. Instead, she looked me in the eye and said, "I need to tell you something before we go any further." Her voice cracked as she admitted she'd gone out with her colleague Marissa after I left. They ended up at a downtown lounge. She drank too much, vented too much, and, her words, let herself get swept away. That's when she met some guy at the bar, and before the night was over, she slept with him. She delivered it like a confession she expected me to process logically, like she was handing me a difficult equation and waiting for me to calculate the right answer. "It didn't mean anything," she insisted. "I was angry. I was drunk. I wasn't myself. It was just one night, one mistake." But the part that chilled me wasn't the betrayal itself. It was her expectation. She genuinely believed that if she explained it in the context of our fight, I would understand, that I would forgive, that I would look past it. When she finished, I asked her one question. "If you hadn't felt guilty, would you have told me?" The silence that followed was deafening. Something in me shut off that night. People expect rage, shouting, maybe even bargaining when they hear a confession like that. But I didn't feel rage. I didn't even feel grief. I just felt empty. I told her I wanted a divorce. Her face crumpled like I had spoken a foreign language. She dropped to her knees, sobbing, clutching at my hands like she could physically hold me in the marriage. "Please, Lucas, we can fix this. Couples get through worse. I'll quit my job. I'll never speak to anyone from that night again. Therapy, anything you want, please." But I wasn't listening anymore. The woman in front of me wasn't the woman I thought I married. The person I loved wouldn't have run to a stranger's arms because of one argument. The weeks that followed were chaos. I moved into Noah's spare room while the divorce paperwork began. Isabella swung between begging for reconciliation and accusing me of being cold-hearted. Her family quickly got involved. Her mother called me, sobbing, saying I was throwing away 6 years over one mistake. Her father asked me to meet him privately to talk about forgiveness, man to man. Her younger brother even sent me a long email about how love was about endurance, about second chances. I kept my answers short and polite. "I understand you love her, but my decision is final." My own family, thankfully, was supportive. My mother asked if I was rushing things, but my cousin Noah said something that stuck with me. If this is how she reacts to one argument, imagine what happens when the problems get bigger. You deserve someone who leans on you during hard times, not someone who runs away. Then came the lies. Isabella started spreading her version of events. According to her, I was controlling, unreasonable, and when she made one mistake out of emotional devastation, I abandoned her. To her friends, she was the victim. To her co-workers, I was the unfeeling husband who refused to forgive. At first, I wanted to correct the record, but then I realized it didn't matter. The people who truly knew me didn't need convincing, and the people who believed her, let them. I wasn't going to waste energy defending myself to strangers. It's been just over a month since I filed. Isabella is still grasping at straws. Letters, flowers, surprise visits at Noah's place, but the switch inside me hasn't flipped back. I don't feel anger or longing or pity, just nothing. She thinks I threw away our marriage, but in truth, she burned it down the night she chose someone else over us. And I've finally come to understand something. Sometimes the end of a marriage doesn't come with fireworks or fury. Sometimes it comes with a single, quiet decision. The decision to stop loving someone who no longer deserves your heart. The first few weeks after filing were disorienting. Divorce is a strange thing. It's not just paperwork and signatures. It's like unraveling a life you thought you'd keep tied together forever. I was still living at my cousin Noah's apartment, which was basically a converted attic above his garage. It was small, one bedroom, a kitchenette, and a futon that felt like it was punishing me for every bad decision I'd ever made, but it was peaceful. Peaceful was something I hadn't felt in weeks. Isabella, however, didn't allow peace for long. She would show up at Noah's house unannounced, pounding on the door until he told her to leave. Sometimes she cried, sometimes she screamed, sometimes she begged me to just talk. When I wouldn't answer, she left notes stuffed into the mailbox. Pages and pages of apologies, rationalizations, and promises. One night, she even slipped a photo of us from our honeymoon under the door. On the back, she had written, "This is who we are. Don't let one mistake erase everything we've built." But the more she tried, the more distant I felt. I didn't even recognize that photo anymore. If Isabella's attempts weren't enough, her family doubled down. Her mother called me constantly. Voicemails filled with guilt trips. "She's your wife. Don't abandon her when she needs you the most." Her father invited me for just a coffee, but it turned into a lecture about how real men forgive, how his own marriage had survived things even worse. He leaned across the table and said, "You'll regret this when you're old and alone." Her sister sent long texts about how Isabella was destroyed, how she was barely eating, barely sleeping. At first, I felt bad, but then I realized every message, every call, every lecture was about Isabella's pain. Not one of them asked how I was doing. Not one of them acknowledged my betrayal. It was as if I was expected to absorb the hurt and just keep standing for everyone else's comfort. That realization hardened me. The divorce proceedings. My lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Marjorie, laid everything out clearly. We had joint assets, no kids, and a relatively straightforward split. But Isabella dragged her feet. She stalled, contested trivial things, claimed she wasn't ready to give up. At one point, she even tried to argue for spousal support, saying she had emotional damages from my abandonment. Marjorie shut that down so fast, it was almost comical. She leaned forward, tapped her pen against the table and said, "Your client admitted to infidelity. I'd advise you not to embarrass her further by pursuing this angle." The look on Isabella's lawyer's face was priceless. Word got around. Mutual friends started to act strange. Some avoided me entirely, clearly uncomfortable with picking sides. Others reached out with awkward, hesitant messages, like they weren't sure what version of the story to believe. One mutual friend, David, finally told me what Isabella had been saying. According to her, I was controlling, obsessed with money, and when she made one emotional mistake, I refused to forgive her. She painted me as cold, unforgiving, incapable of compassion. "She's telling everyone you just walked away without even trying," David admitted. I laughed. I didn't walk away. She shoved me out the door when she decided sleeping with a stranger was easier than talking to me. It stung, though. Not because I cared what strangers thought, but because the woman I loved once was now willing to twist reality to preserve her image. One night, around 2 months into the process, Isabella showed up at Noah's again. This time, she didn't knock. She sat on the front steps in the rain until Noah finally opened the door and told her she needed to leave. I watched from the upstairs window as she sobbed uncontrollably, her hair plastered to her face, clutching that same honeymoon photo. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than numbness, but it wasn't love, it was grief. Grief for what I thought we had. Grief for the person I thought she was. I wanted to go down and comfort her, to wrap her in a towel and tell her everything would be okay. But then I remembered she wasn't mine anymore. She had made sure of that. So I turned away. By the third month, something shifted. The constant texts slowed. The unannounced visits stopped. Her family finally gave up trying to sway me. It was as if Isabella finally realized the fight was over. For the first time, silence filled the space she had occupied in my head, and into that silence came clarity. I started running again, something I'd given up years ago. I went out for beers with coworkers instead of rushing home to manage dinner schedules. I even signed up for a woodworking class, something I'd always wanted to try. Slowly, I started feeling like myself again. Not the married man who carried the weight of two people's happiness. Just me. Lucas. The divorce isn't finalized yet, but I'm not waiting for papers to move on. Isabella's story ended the night she chose betrayal. Mine is still being written. And for the first time in months, I'm curious to see what the next chapter holds. 6 months after that first explosive confession, the divorce papers were finally signed. It was almost anticlimactic. Just a quick meeting at Marjorie's office, signatures on crisp documents, a handshake, and it was done. Isabella sat across from me the entire time. Her makeup was flawless, her posture perfect, but I could see the cracks. She kept wringing her hands under the table, her eyes darting toward me like she was hoping for some last-minute miracle. When it was over, she lingered at the door. "Lucas," she said softly, "you don't have to do this. We could still fix it." I didn't answer. I just walked past her and out into the parking lot. The weight of 6 years lifting off my shoulders all at once. For the first time, I was truly free. Freedom didn't mean she was gone, though. A few weeks later, Noah texted me. "She's at the bar down the street telling everyone you cheated on her first." I went down there, not to confront her, but just to see. Sure enough, Isabella was holding court at a high-top table, glass of wine in hand, spinning her version of events to whoever would listen. When she saw me walk in, her expression flickered. Panic, shame, then something sharper. She marched up to me and hissed, "Why couldn't you just forgive me? Do you know what people are saying about me now? Do you care?" I looked her in the eye and said, "You cared more about strangers at a bar that night than you did about me. Live with the story you created." I left her standing there, trembling with anger. That was the last time I saw her face to face. After that, life felt lighter. I poured myself into hobbies, running, woodworking, even weekend hikes I used to skip because Isabella wasn't outdoorsy. I reconnected with old college friends I hadn't seen in years. The more distance I put between myself and her, the clearer everything became. I realized how much of myself I had bent to keep the marriage running smoothly. I had always been the cautious one, the planner, the fixer. With her gone, I didn't have to be the stable one anymore. I could just be, and that was liberating. It was during one of those woodworking classes that I met Maya. She wasn't anything like Isabella. No polished charm or dramatic flair. Maya was steady, calm, the kind of person who listened more than she spoke. We started as friends, sharing tools, joking about our crooked shelves and uneven cuts. Then coffee after class, then dinners, then laughter that filled spaces I didn't realize had gone quiet. I didn't fall fast. I didn't want to, but slowly, almost without noticing, I started to trust again. It's been nearly a year since Isabella's confession. The divorce is long behind me. I don't hear much about her anymore. Just whispers from mutual friends that she's not the same, and still blames me for everything. I don't hate her. Hate would mean she still mattered. What I feel now is indifference. She's just someone I used to know. If anything, I'm grateful. Grateful she showed me who she really was before we bought that house, before children tied us together forever. Grateful I got out early enough to rebuild. And as for me, I'm not the man who walked into that kitchen 6 months ago and heard his wife confess betrayal. I'm stronger, sharper, more myself than I've ever been. Sometimes the end of a marriage feels like the end of a life, but for me, it was the beginning of one.